uh, 4 destroyers, and we had 2 cruisers, and we had 2 submarines, and we had a convoy of 162 vessels that went across the Atlantic. And because of thinking that they had, realizing there was U-boats down through the English Channel and other areas, well, they took us clear up around Iceland, and what a trip we had. And we had waves when you go over in the winter months, those waves, in that ship were down here, and then you look up, and way up there, you guys that served in the Navy or whatever, those great big waves, and 100 and some odd feet high, and those waves would if the ship wasn't right and sailing right, it engulfed us, and we would have been to the bottom of the old ocean. But we docked in England, went up around and came down, and we docked at, let's see. We pulled around Southampton and docked at Bristol, England. From Bristol, England, they put us on a little train and sent us around, and we got to a little place called Thatcham, England, and they took us out of the old 40 and 8 train cars that they had. And that was about what they were, 40 and 8s, and they'd hold 40 men or 8 horses, and they unloaded us there at Thatcham, England, and we were there and served for maybe a month, and then they moved us to a different spot just up out of London a little ways, and we were right across the road, from the airstrip of the 8th Air Force. And so we got to see many things that took place with the 8th Air Force. Well, when D-Day came, I'd been working, I was a small arms specialist, and there wasn't anything I didn't know about any small arms, and I was a specialist on all the machine guns and etc., and synchronizing everything in the airplanes. And so I was sent from airbase to airbase, synchronizing machine guns and etc. for the Air Forces, not only our Air Force, but for the British Air Force as well. And as such, when D-Day came, I was down at Southampton, and I had been working on guns and so forth. And so Southampton, I watched as they took off to invade on the 6th day of June, and the air was just as black as it could be, with airplanes going one way, and just as black as it could be the airplanes coming back the other way. It was just black. The sky was black as far as you could see. And to look out across on that English Channel and see all those thousands of ships out there, I was absolutely astounded to see such a tremendous display of might from the American forces to go into Normandy. And they had their troubles. I didn't go into Normandy until D+7. Anyhow, our unit cut across the Cherbourg Peninsula and on down. But to serve in the military and go across the different nations, I was in 3 different battles, and when the war was over, our unit had been pulled out so that it did not go into the Battle of the Bulge. Our unit was pulled out, and we went back down around another area to reinforce a unit. And when the war was over, I ended up at Enns, Austria, overlooking the Milk Plain. And as you look out across the Milk Plain, it looks towards Vienna. And Enns, Austria was a little community there, and sitting up here on a kind of a plateau, and down here was the Enns River, and the Enns River dumped into the Danube River. And out across that Milk Plain, as far as you could see, German troops trying to come back. They wanted to get across the Enns River. It was the only bridge intact. They wanted to get across the Enns River so they didn't get taken by the Russians. And so we had them coming across the Enns River, and I was one of the officers on duty there at the Enns River, and they were throwing their weapons into the Enns River, and they threw so many weapons into the Enns River, it started backing the water up, and so old General Reinhardt, who was commander of the division, said, we've got to blow that. Well, I was a small arms specialist as well, and small arms explosive expert. So we took C2 and went down and got it around different weapons, different areas, and blew the weapons so that they would not dam up that dam up the water there, so that bridge would be pulled out. So that was quite a scene. But the troops from Germany were coming across as fast as they could. We had a man that came across, a general came across. He had a white flag. And he came across, and I stopped his vehicle and his driver, and he said, I'm General Reinhardt. He said, I'd like to speak to, in German, I'd like to speak to your commanding officer, your general. And I just told him, I says, well, our general, I got the MPs, and I said, they'll take you up there to our general. And I said, our general's name is Reinhardt. He said, no, that's my name. My name is Reinhardt. So anyhow, he went up, and when he came back, he said, your German general is stupid. He won't, I told him he needs to combine with us right now so that we fight the Russians, and then you won't be fighting them alone. Because if you don't fight the Russians now, you'll be fighting them alone. Well, he was had pretty good knowledge of the situation. Anyhow, that was the end of the war over there, and I got stuck in the Army of Occupation, and I came home on the 6th day of, I got out over there on the 6th, I got out on the 21st of June, 1946. I was released from the military over in Europe. And I came home. And then I stayed in reserve, and then I got recalled during the Korean situation and taught weapons training down at Fort Benning, Georgia. Some taught during the Korean situation. Now, during all of my time, I served with blacks. When I went through a Repel Depot, the commanding officer of Repel Depot said, you're an infantry officer. I said, yes. He said, I'm going to send you down here to take care of, we're retraining red ball and yellow ball express troops, and they're all black. And you're the only white officer, and you're in charge of them. And I said, well, thank you. So I was put in as their commanding officer. And the G3 at the post had made up a training schedule, and he didn't know anything about infantry training and tactics. And first day he wanted to take a 25-mile hike. And I just said, no way. I said, I'll make a new training schedule. So I went down, told them, got the NCOs there, and they had one black officer and lots of good sergeants. And I told this officer and the first sergeant and the master sergeant what the training schedule was, and get that out of here. About the next morning, here came all the NCOs, and they'd all pulled off their stripes and said they didn't want stripes anymore. And the officer says, I'm not going to serve here, and you can't do that to fresh troops. And I said, I don't intend to. I said, we'll march out 2 miles and park and have some training with our arms and so forth, and have dinner there, and then we'll march back 2 miles to camp later on. So I took them little by little until I got transferred out of there, and they sent in a new CO. They sent in they had a couple of officers that had been wounded that served in the Black Air Force. Now you brothers that served in World War II or so forth, you've heard of the Black Air Force that they had. Those men were good. They were well trained, and they knew what they were doing. And they accompanied the troops when they went on the one trip to the Pulaski oil fields. I mean, they accompanied the planes when they went to that Pulaski oil field. And it was good that they had those black men that were flyers, and they were good. They were outstanding. I had a lot of praise for those men. I had a lot of praise for the men that served with me and that I taught and trained. Anyhow, down at Fort Benning, Georgia, I trained a lot of others. Every nation, kindred, tongue, and people just about. And you know, I started thinking of the 5 W's. Why, when who, why, when, where, and how, or what. And you know, this nation is made up of absolutely tremendous peoples from all nations, all nations. The last time that I had a check, and you can dispute it, or if any of you know better, the last that I saw, we have in the United States people from every nation that are in the United States of America, from every nation in the world. Every nation in the world. How many nations have we got in the world? Now that we've had a couple of new ones, what have we got? 186? I think 186 nations. That's, you know, from when we served over in Europe, and to see all the changes that have taken place, and to see the many, many peoples that have come to this country, that's Americanism. We're not divided. The only way we're divided is in our thoughts and some of our actions and our deeds. We all have the right of choice. We have the right of freedom. We have the right of choice of choosing. And what a blessing it is to us to be Americans that we have that right of choice. What a blessing it is to us. And I think that each and every one of us should be thankful for the lives that we have had, the experiences that we have had, the opportunities that have been presented to us, and the way we've conducted ourselves in accepting those things to make a living for ourselves and our families and our loved ones. What a blessing it is to be in America and have those opportunities and realize and know that we can take care of ourselves. And in spite of all of that, we have, I think, more people going hungry in this country than they have in Africa, from what I heard the other day. We have more people going hungry in this country than we have in Africa. What a shame that is, that we, being such a great nation, an American, and realizing what we have, that we can't provide and take care of our own people. Well, I want to compliment the Legion for working with Girls State and Boys State, and working up to the Veterans Hospitals, and assisting and helping with all the other programs, the oratorical contest, the American Legion baseball. And you know, my daughter went to Girls State down at Cedar City one year when she was a senior in high school, and had boys that went to Logan to Boys State, up to Utah State. And I appreciated that, and it's been a pleasure to me to try and do my best to assist and help the American Legion. And I have served in different posts and been commander of 3 different posts, and served as commander 4 different times, and I've enjoyed it. I appreciate the American Legion and what they do, and I'm proud that you are all good Americans, and that you served and served diligently, and realize and understand the things that you provided to assist and help others. And I know that you do the same thing now for your families and loved ones and others. And you wouldn't be here to the Legion if you didn't have a desire to serve and help in the American Legion. And I thank each and every one of you for that. And I say that it's the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's quite informative. Would you be open for any questions?
Yes.
Anybody have any questions for the Colonel? Got to be some questions.
Comment, glad we survived, right?
Oh, I'll say some of the experiences that we have. I'm LDS, and I'll say that. But when we were in France, we'd had some bad times, and one night this moon was full. It looked like it was tonight. Great big moon up there, and my tent was right by a little ravine, and I went out to that ravine and stood there and looked up at that big moon, and it just hit me, are you going to get home? And you know, I got down on my knees and I prayed. and asked God, will I get home? Will I get home? And when will I get home if I do? And, well, no answer came. And I couldn't say that anyhow things went well. I got home. I never got wounded. So I was blessed. And about the 4 years that I served over there was very good and informative and in many respects enjoyable. Thank you.
Anybody have any other questions? I have one. When was you deployed over to England?
Let's see. We were in. Went out the. We were out the 28th of December, 1943.
43.
And they brought us back, and we didn't go back out until in January of 44. Yeah, so we went over in January of 44. Yeah.
Well, that was the time to go over there.
Yes, and it was the waters were rough. Yeah, I'll never forget the big waves. I looked at those, and having been a young man born and raised down in Manti, Sanpete County, why, I'll tell you what, that water was humongous. I'd seen the ocean, though, before. I'd been down to the Pacific Ocean and been down there with my father, who was in the Roosevelt administration. And so anyhow, I enjoyed getting out of the big waters. I called it the big waters.
You ever get back over there? You ever been back?
Yes. Yeah. I had to negotiate some contracts with I worked for Hill Air Force Base, and I negotiated contracts with the British, with the Australians, with the Canadians, and we had to cancel what was known as the Skyboat program when I was working at Hillfield as a officer. I was a contract negotiator for them, and I'd negotiated on what was known as the Skyboat program. And President Kennedy was president of the United States then, and I got to work one morning, and there on my desk was a telegram, and it said, "Cancel the Skyboat program effective immediately. Signed, John F. Kennedy, President of the United States." So I went into the district supervisors there and just showed them the telegram and said, "This is what's got to take place."
Did you keep the telegram?
So, no, I had to put it in the file. I had to put it in the file, but they sent me back east, and I was back east for 7 weeks negotiating contracts with big firms. One of the bigger ones was the Otis Elevator Defense Industrial Division, and then we had Westinghouse and General Electric, and several of the big outfits that I had to negotiate contracts with, and negotiated some good contracts and saved the government a lot of money. I knew the programs and knew the contracts, and saved the government a lot of money, where they tried to charge the government for additional engineering and reverse engineering, and our engineers had done all the reverse engineering all the way, so they could not collect one penny on reverse engineering. And throughout the contracts back there, I saved the Hill Air Force Base about $32 million in those contracts, yes.
How was the food? What did you roll with them? Did you get 3 squares a day?
No.
You remember we had sea rations at home we loved?
Well.
You always took the cigarettes. I took the chiclets.
Well, no. Thanksgiving, Christmas Day in 1944, everybody had been promised turkey dinners, and we didn't quite get it, but we sure had some good C&D rations.
Well, I can tell you that the Vietnam veterans enjoyed the fresh C rations that you guys were supposed to get. They were like 21 years old by then.
What's the difference between a C and a D ration?
Well, a D ration.
Days, too.
Yeah, and there's the K rations. In the D ration, it was all just little biscuits and there was a hard piece of cheese.
Like stew.
Yeah, and the C rations was in a can, and that C rations you could get the stew, you could get meatballs, or different things that they had in the C rations. They had a breakfast, and they had a lunch, and they had a dinner, and the C rations weren't bad. C rations weren't bad, but the D rations, and then the D ration and the one ration you'd get, and that was it was about 3 inches, maybe 2.5 inches long, and about an inch square, and that was just a hard, old, dark chocolate bar. And that was hard. But it was good when you're hungry. Yeah, it was good.
Is this my turn? Excuse me, of all the places you've been in the world, Father, where would you like to live?
I'll end on this note, if it's all right with you. Okay.
I'm going to hide.
No, you asked me. You asked me where I'm going so early in the morn. I'm just a traveler roving. I'm just a roving on. I've looked this whole world over, and many times I've searched in vain for a spot that seems like heaven to me, and I long to be again. I'm going to hide away out beside that Utah trail. Light as bright as day, far out on that Utah trail. There's where I'll settle down in peace, where all is still, in a little hut just built for two, tucked away in the heart of the hills. There 'neath the skies of blue, in the good old summertime, out where all friends are true and all nature is in rhyme. Someone is waiting with a love that never fails, waiting patiently to welcome me far out on that Utah trail. Thanks, son. We'll end with that.
Thank you very much, Don. That's just incredible.